It was a bright afternoon at the luxurious Blue Waters Hotel, a popular resort for families looking to escape the hustle and bustle of their daily lives. The hotel's sprawling pool area was filled with laughter, the splashing of water, and the occasional sound of children's shrieks of joy. Guests were lounging on pool chairs, sipping drinks under colorful umbrellas, while lifeguards kept a watchful eye over the swimmers. Maria, the hotel maid, was part of the behind-the-scenes staff who ensured the area remained clean and orderly. Though her job mostly involved tidying up, sweeping, and occasionally attending to guests' needs, she prided herself on being a dedicated and hard-working employee. That day, Maria was just finishing cleaning the poolside lounge chairs. She wiped down tables, arranged cushions, and tossed used towels into a laundry bin. It was a routine she'd performed 1,000 times, but today something felt different. The air was thicker, charged with an energy Maria couldn't quite place. It was almost as if the world itself had held its breath. She paused for a moment to catch her breath, her gaze sweeping over the scene before her. Then, without warning, the world erupted into chaos. A scream, a mother's scream, pierced the thigh, calm cutting through the noise of the pool. It was filled with panic, terror, and desperation. Maria's heart skipped a beat as she whipped around, her eyes scanning the pool. There, in the center of the sparkling blue water, was a sight that sent a wave of dread crashing through her. Chest, a baby, no older than a year, was floating face down, lifeless in the deep end of the pool. The mother stood at the edge, her hands clutching her chest, her face ashen with fear. The child wasn't moving, wasn't crying. It was as if the tiny life had been snuffed out in an instant. Time seemed to slow. Maria's mind went blank for a fraction of a second as she processed the situation, but that moment of hesitation didn't last long. Instinct took over. Her heart racing, Maria sprinted towards the pool, her feet barely touching the ground as she moved faster than she had ever moved in her life. The pool was large, its depth stretching far beyond what was visible at the surface, but Maria's eyes were locked on the baby, her focus narrowing to a singular purpose: to save this child. She reached the pool's edge, not bothering with a moment of hesitation. Without a second thought, Maria dove straight in, her body slicing through the cool water as she plunged into the deep end. The moment she submerged, the shock of the cold water hit her like a slap. But there was no time to think about that. Every second counted. She propelled herself forward with powerful strokes, her body moving in automatic, practiced motions. When she reached the baby, her heart sank. The small body was limp, floating eerily on the surface. She quickly grabbed the child, pulling the fragile form into her arms, cradling it gently but urgently as she swam back to the poolside. Her breaths were short and rapid, each pull of water, feeling like it required an unimaginable effort. She could hear the voices of the guests and the frantic shouts of the mother echoing in the background, but she blocked them all out. The only thing that mattered was the baby, its tiny chest which she prayed would rise and fall. Maria reached the edge of the pool and, with trembling arms, lifted the baby out of the water. She pulled the small figure to her chest, pressing its tiny body against her, hoping against hope that it would begin to breathe again. For what felt like an eternity, the baby lay still, its skin pale and cold against Maria's. The crowd had gathered around them, some people looking on in shock, others already dialing for help. But it was Maria's hands that worked quickly, desperately. She knew what to do. She tilted the baby's head back, gently clearing the airways, and then she began to administer CPR, pushing down on the child's tiny chest. Her hands were shaking, but there was no room for fear, not now, not when this child's life was hanging in the balance. Then, a miracle. The baby coughed. It was a small, almost imperceptible sound, but to Maria, it was the sweetest sound in the world. The baby's body twitched, and then its chest rose with a breath. Relief flooded over Maria like a wave. The baby was alive. It was breathing again. The mother rushed forward, her hands shaking as she took her child in her arms, whispering a mix of frantic thanks and tears. The paramedics arrived shortly after, and they confirmed that the baby would be fine. But Maria didn't hear much after that. She could hardly believe what had just happened. Her heart was still pounding, and her body felt like it had been through a war. But amidst the adrenaline and the chaos, there was a sense of calm within her. She had done it. She had saved a life. Little did she know, this moment of heroism would soon be overshadowed by something far darker, something that would change everything for her. Maria's heart was still racing when the paramedics arrived and checked the baby over. Their reassuring words filled the air. The child was fine, just scared, but alive. Maria's knees felt weak beneath her, her hands still trembling, but there was a sense of peace within her. She had done the impossible. She had saved a life. The mother, overcome with gratitude, pulled Maria into a tight hug, her words of thanks heartfelt and sincere. But before Maria could even take a breath, a voice broke through the growing sense of relief. "Maria, I need to speak to you," Mr. Alvarez, the hotel owner, said coldly as he approached her. His face was pale, his expression distant. The warmth that had once characterized his greetings was gone, replaced by a steely demeanor. It was as though he was a completely different person. Maria looked at him, confused. The gratitude from the family still hung in the air, but his gaze made her uneasy. "What is it, Mr. Alvarez?" she asked, her voice shaky from the adrenaline. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced toward the pool area where the guests had started to disperse, and then motioned for her to follow him. "Come with me," he ordered. Maria felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had never seen him act this way before. He had always been polite, if not exactly friendly, but this was different. She had never been summoned like this, certainly not after such an event. Her mind raced with questions, but she pushed them aside, walking silently behind him. The crowd had begun to dissipate, and the sound of her footsteps echoed unnervingly in the empty hallway as they made their way to Mr. Alvarez's office. Once inside, he shut the door behind them with a soft click. The sudden silence felt oppressive, and Maria's unease only grew. Mr. Alvarez stood with his back to her for a moment, his hands clasped behind him, staring out the window. When he finally turned around, the anger in his eyes was unmistakable. "I'm afraid I have to let you go," he said flatly. Maria blinked, her heart lurching in her chest. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "What?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She had saved a baby's life, yet now she was being told to leave? It didn't make sense. "You're fired, Maria," he repeated, his voice cold. Effective immediately. Maria felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. But I saved the baby. I did everything I could. Why would you fire me? She asked, her voice trembling with confusion and hurt. Mr. Alvarez's expression remained unmoving. You acted without permission. You went against protocol. There are procedures in place for handling emergencies, and you completely disregarded them. You took matters into your own hands. Her mind whirled as she tried to process his words. Procedures? She hadn't thought about following any protocol in that moment. All she had thought about was saving a life. The child had been in danger, and she had acted instinctively, without thinking twice. But now, it seemed like that very instinct, her ability to act when it mattered most, was being punished. But the baby could have died, Maria protested, her voice rising. You're firing me for doing what was right? Mr. Alvarez's eyes narrowed. This isn't a hospital, Maria. This is a hotel. We can't have employees causing a scene like that. It's bad for business. What if something went wrong? What if the baby had gotten hurt? But it didn't, Maria shot back, her heart heavy with frustration. You don't understand. I didn't wait for someone to tell me what to do. I just acted. I saved a life. That should matter more than any rule. Mr. Alvarez stood in silence, his jaw clenched. The rules are there for a reason. We can't have people taking risks without thinking. The hotel has an image to maintain, and your actions could have damaged it. Maria shook her head in disbelief. Her heart ached as the weight of his words settled in. The image of the hotel. Was that really what mattered to him? It felt like a slap in the face, like everything she had worked for, everything she had given to the hotel, meant nothing. I'm sorry, Maria, he added, his voice softer now, though the distance was still clear. But this is the decision that needs to be made. You can pack your things. Your shift is over. Maria stood frozen, unable to believe what was happening. She had been dedicated to this job for years. She had always worked tirelessly, never complaining, always striving to do her best. And now, in the blink of an eye, she was being cast aside for doing something heroic. It was like a cruel joke. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away, unwilling to let him see her breakdown. She turned on her heel and walked out of the office, her steps slow and heavy, the reality of the situation sinking in with every step. As she gathered her things in the small storage room, she felt a deep sense of injustice. How could he do this to me? She wondered. She had given everything to this job, and now it had all been taken away, simply because she had done what she thought was right. Maria had just finished packing up her things when she overheard the voices outside the office. At first, she didn't pay much attention to them. Her mind was still reeling from the conversation she had just had with Mr. Alvarez. The shock of being fired, especially after everything she had done to save that baby, was too overwhelming. She could barely process what had happened, and the emotions of betrayal and disbelief weighed heavily on her shoulders. But then, as she stood near the door, she froze. The words being spoken outside the office caught her attention, and she couldn't help but listen in. I can't believe this is happening, Mr. Alvarez said, his voice laced with disbelief and frustration. Maria pressed her ear to the door, trying to make sense of the situation. His words made her stomach churn. What do you mean? Came the reply from the head of security, a man named Carlos who worked at the hotel. His voice was calm. But there was a noticeable edge to it, as if he too was troubled by the unfolding events. The cameras, they show everything, Mr. Alvarez continued, his voice quiet but urgent. She saved the baby. She did everything right, but I just fired her. What am I supposed to do now? Maria's heart skipped a beat as she realized what they were talking about. Cameras? She hadn't given it much thought, but the hotel was equipped with security cameras, both in public spaces and the more private areas. She knew they were there. After all, the hotel was a large, high-profile establishment, but she had never imagined they would be involved in her dismissal. Carlos's voice broke through her thoughts. "You saw the footage?" he asked. His tone was a mix of concern and confusion. "Yes," Mr. Alvarez said, his voice strained. "I watched it. I had to check. I thought maybe she had acted recklessly, maybe taken the baby in a way that wasn't safe. But the footage, it shows everything. She was calm, efficient, and she saved that child. She didn't hesitate. She followed everything correctly. There's nothing wrong with what she did." Maria felt a wave of both relief and shock rush through her. He saw the footage. He knows the truth. The hotel owner, who had just moments ago fired her, was now aware that she had acted heroically. But what did that mean now? Could there be a way for her to go back to work? Could the decision be reversed? But then, the weight of Mr. Alvarez's earlier words came crashing down again. "I was wrong," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I shouldn't have fired her. She saved that baby. I just panicked. I was worried about the hotel's image and the potential consequences. But she did what any good person would have done." Maria's hands trembled as she stood, trying to steady herself. "So he knows. He knows that I did the right thing." "But what does that mean for me now?" Carlos responded with a sigh. "You should have known better, Mr. Alvarez. You've been here long enough to understand that people don't act like that without a reason. She wasn't acting out of line. She was saving a life. You owe her an apology." There was a long pause before Mr. Alvarez spoke again, his voice resigned. "I know. I've made a terrible mistake. I didn't see it clearly in the moment. I acted out of fear, out of concern for what could have gone wrong. But now, I see the truth. She saved a life, and I fired her for it." Maria leaned against the wall, her heart pounding. The realization that Mr. Alvarez was finally coming to terms with his mistake was a strange comfort. But it didn't change the fact that her life had been uprooted in an instant. The thought of returning to the hotel now felt impossible. How could I work for someone who didn't trust me enough to see the truth in front of him? She thought back to the moment when she had dived into the pool, when she had cradled the baby's lifeless body and fought with every ounce of her strength to save him. In that moment, there had been no thought of consequence, no consideration of rules or procedures, only the overwhelming need to act. She hadn't hesitated because she knew that the child's life depended on her. That was all that mattered. "I can't undo what I've done, Carlos," Mr. Alvarez said, his voice heavy with regret. "But I can at least make things right. I'm going to apologize to her publicly. I'll tell everyone the truth. She deserves that much." Carlos didn't answer right away. The silence hung in the air, thick with the weight of the situation. Finally, he said, "It won't be enough. Not after what you've done. But it's a start." Maria stood in the quiet hallway, her mind racing with thoughts and emotions. She had given everything to that hotel, working tirelessly and never asking for much in return. Yet, in the moment when her quick thinking had saved a child's life, she had been tossed aside like an afterthought. And now, the man who had fired her was attempting to make amends. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The conversation outside the office continued, but Maria couldn't bear to listen any longer. She turned away, her heart heavy with the realization that the respect she had once held for the hotel and for Mr. Alvarez had been shattered. She had done the right thing, but in the eyes of the people who should have supported her, it hadn't mattered. What mattered most to them was the reputation of the hotel, not the life of a child. The next day, as the early morning light filtered through the cracks in the office blinds, Maria received an unexpected message. It was from Mr. Alvarez. She read it slowly, almost unable to believe it at first. The message was short, but the words were unmistakable. "I need to speak with you. Can you come in? It's important." Her heart skipped a beat. Maria had been preparing herself to move on, to leave the painful memory of the hotel behind. She had spent the night tossing and turning, her mind still reeling from the shock of her firing. Every thought led back to that moment by the pool, where she had acted to save a life, only to be betrayed by the very people she had worked so hard for. She had accepted that she was no longer wanted at the hotel, but now this message felt like a lifeline, a chance to have her side of the story heard. With a mix of caution and curiosity, Maria made her way back to the hotel. As she walked through, the familiar corridors, memories of the people she had worked with, the colleagues she had once trusted, the guests who had complimented her on her work, flooded her mind. She couldn't help but wonder why Mr. Alvarez had asked to see her. Had he truly come to apologize? Or was this just another attempt to distance himself from the mess he had created? When she arrived at the office, she found the door slightly ajar. She knocked softly, hesitating before stepping inside. Mr. Alvarez was standing by the window, his back to her, staring out at the bustling pool area below. He looked different than he had the day before. The sternness in his posture had softened, and there was a weariness in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. It was as if the weight of his decision was finally sinking in. "Maria, thank you for coming," he said without turning around. His voice was softer than she had ever heard it, laced with regret. I owe you an apology, and I know it's too late, but I need you to hear it from me." Maria stood still, unsure of how to respond. Her heart was still heavy with anger and hurt, but she knew she owed it to herself to hear him out. She had never wanted to be fired. She had never wanted to leave the place she had worked so hard to be a part of. But the events of the past few days had shaken her to the core. She wasn't sure what kind of apology could make up for it. Mr. Alvarez finally turned to face her, his eyes heavy with remorse. "I made a terrible mistake, Maria. Yesterday I reacted without thinking. I let my fear of the consequences cloud my judgment. I didn't see the bigger picture. You were the one who saved that child, who acted in a moment of crisis, and instead of recognizing your courage, I fired you." Maria's breath caught in her throat. She had been expecting an apology, but this was something she hadn't anticipated. There was sincerity in his voice, something raw and vulnerable that she hadn't seen in him before. It was clear that he was struggling with the consequences of his actions. "I acted out of fear," he continued, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I worried about the hotel's reputation, about what the press might say, about what could go wrong. But I was wrong. You did everything right. I should have trusted you, believed in you. You were the one who saved a life, and I was the one who made the mistake." Maria was silent for a moment, processing his words. She had heard the words, "I'm sorry," from people before, but this felt different. There was no excuse, no justification for what had happened. But for the first time, she could see that Mr. Alvarez understood the gravity of the situation. It wasn't just about the hotel anymore. It was about the person he had wronged. "I should have never fired you," he added, his voice shaking. "And I can't undo what I did. But I can make things right. I'm going to tell everyone the truth about what happened, about how you acted in the best interest of that child. I want to make sure you're not left in the dark about this. You deserve that much." Maria's emotions were a whirlwind. Part of her wanted to hold on to the anger she had felt, to demand more than just words. The other part of her, the part that had saved a life without a second thought, felt a flicker of hope. Could she forgive him? Could she believe that his apology was genuine? "I appreciate the apology, Mr. Alvarez," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was still raw. "But I don't think I can come back to work here. You made a decision that hurt me deeply, and while I understand that you regret it now, the damage is done. I can't trust that it won't happen again." He nodded slowly, as if he had expected this response. "I understand. I would never ask you to come back if you don't want to. I wanted you to know that I was wrong, and I'm sorry for everything I put you through." Maria's heart softened at his words, but the scars of what had happened remained. She could feel the tension slowly lifting from her shoulders as she recognized that this chapter was truly closing. But she also knew that she had to move forward. She had acted with courage, and in the end, that was what truly mattered. "Thank you," Maria said, her voice quieter now. "I'll take your apology, but I need to move on. I can't keep reliving this." With that, she turned to leave, her mind made up. As she walked out of his office, she realized that while the hotel had let her go, she had gained something far more valuable: her sense of self-respect, her courage, and her belief in doing the right thing. And that, she knew, would carry her far beyond the walls of that hotel. Days passed since the emotional conversation with Mr. Alvarez, but Maria couldn't shake the mix of emotions swirling within her. The apology had been unexpected, and though part of her wanted to believe in his sincerity, another part of her knew that the betrayal would be hard to forget. She had been fired for doing the right thing, and no matter how many apologies Mr. Alvarez offered, the sting of that decision remained. Maria had tried to focus on moving forward, looking for new job opportunities. The city was full of hotels, cafes, and restaurants, all offering positions that she could easily qualify for. Yet, despite her best efforts, a part of her always returned to the same question. Could she forgive Mr. Alvarez and the hotel? Was it possible to start over after this betrayal? Her heart was divided. On one hand, she knew her worth. She had acted in the heat of the moment to save a life, and that was something that no one could take from her. On the other hand, she felt a lingering resentment toward the people who had allowed fear and business interests to overshadow humanity. How could she trust an employer who had so quickly turned their back on her? But as the days went on, Maria received a letter. It was an official letter from Mr. Alvarez and the hotel management. She stared at it for a long time before finally opening it, not knowing what to expect. Inside, the letter contained more than just words of apology. It was an offer, a formal invitation to return to the hotel with a promotion. The letter stated that Mr. Alvarez had reevaluated the hotel's policies, and after careful consideration, he had decided to change certain practices regarding employee training and emergency response. Maria's quick action had inspired him to take a hard look at the company's handling of emergencies, and he wanted her to help lead these changes. The letter also included a generous offer of a new role, Head of Housekeeping Operations, a position that came with more responsibility and a significant pay raise. Mr. Alvarez expressed his hope that Maria would consider coming back, given the important role she had played in the hotel's recent changes. Maria's hands shook as she read through the letter. Part of her felt a rush of excitement. The idea of returning to the hotel, with a higher position and recognition for her bravery, seemed like a dream come true. But another part of her recoiled at the thought of stepping back into that same environment, one where her actions had been so easily dismissed. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, Maria decided to take time to reflect. She thought back to the days when she had first worked at the hotel, the friendships she had built with the staff, the pride she had felt in keeping everything running smoothly. She had enjoyed the work, the feeling of being part of something bigger, and the trust the hotel had once shown her. But the memory of that day, the day when she had been fired after saving a life, was still too fresh in her mind. She could still see the look in Mr. Alvarez's eyes when he told her to pack her things, the coldness in his voice when he dismissed her actions. That image haunted her, and she wasn't sure if she could ever look at the hotel the same way again. After a long night of sleepless reflection, Maria made the decision to go back to the hotel. She would meet with Mr. Alvarez and hear him out, in person. If he truly wanted to make amends, she would give him a chance to prove it. After all, this could be her chance to lead change, not just for herself, but for the employees who would follow her example. The next morning, she walked back into the hotel, her nerves a jumble of excitement and caution. The lobby, which had once felt like a second home, now seemed foreign to her. She had spent so many years working here, but today it felt different. It felt like stepping into a new chapter, one where she wasn't just a maid, but someone who had the power to influence real change. When Mr. Alvarez saw her standing in the lobby, waiting for him, his face lit up with relief. He led her into his office, where they sat down to discuss the details of her potential return. "Maria, I know I can't take back what happened," Mr. Alvarez began, his voice still filled with regret. "But I'm asking for a second chance. I know I was wrong, and I want to show you that I can do better, that we can do better as a company." Maria listened quietly, her eyes focused on him. She could see the sincerity in his expression, and she could hear the conviction in his voice. The weight of the past was heavy, but there was something in the way he spoke that made her believe he had learned from his mistakes. "I'm here because I believe in the changes you want to make," Maria said carefully. But I need to know that the hotel values its employees, that it values people above all else. If we're going to move forward together, we need to build a foundation of trust. It has to be different this time." Mr. Alvarez nodded, his eyes bright with hope. "I understand. I'm committed to that. And I'm committed to supporting you in every way possible." Maria thought for a moment, feeling the weight of her decision pressing down on her. This was more than just a job offer. It was an opportunity to redefine her role, to help create an environment where people were treated with respect and dignity, no matter their position. Finally, she nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. "I'll come back. On one condition. We need to ensure that we have proper emergency protocols in place, not just for the hotel's benefit, but for the safety of everyone here." "I'll lead that effort." Mr. Alvarez smiled, visibly relieved. "You've got it." Maria stood, feeling a sense of closure wash over her. This was her chance to make a real difference, not just for herself, but for the people who depended on this hotel for their livelihoods. It was a second chance, a chance to heal, to grow, and to lead. As Maria walked out of Mr. Alvarez's office, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready. She had already saved one life. Now, she would help save many others by making sure no one else ever felt like their humanity had been overlooked. The days following her decision to return to the hotel were a whirlwind of emotions for Maria. Though she had agreed to accept Mr. Alvarez's offer, something within her had changed. The hotel, once a place she had been proud to work at, now felt different, charged with a sense of possibility but also fraught with the weight of her past experiences. She knew that returning wasn't just about the position or the pay raise. It was about reclaiming her power and proving that she could make a real difference. As she walked into the hotel for her first day back, Maria felt a strange mix of anticipation and caution. The familiar faces of her colleagues greeted her, but she couldn't help but notice the changes in the air. There was a heightened awareness, a new respect in the way people spoke to her. Maria had always been well-liked, but now, as she stood in her new role, she felt the weight of responsibility. People were looking to her, not just as a fellow employee, but as someone who had proven herself in the most unexpected and heroic of ways. Her office was on the top floor of the hotel, overlooking the bustling city below. The view was spectacular, but as Maria sat at her new desk, she couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. She had the power to change things, to make the hotel a safer and more compassionate place, but that also came with the pressure to succeed. The weight of her responsibility felt much heavier than the desk in front of her. Her first task was to begin revising the hotel's emergency protocols. Mr. Alvarez had already given her the green light to take charge, and she immediately began working on new procedures that would prioritize safety and response time in crisis situations. Her experience, the one she had gained when saving that baby, made her uniquely qualified for the role. No one knew the importance of swift action. In a moment of panic more than she did, the team she would work with was small but capable, and together they spent hours refining training materials, organizing drills, and ensuring that every employee, from housekeeping to front desk staff, knew how to respond in case of an emergency. As the weeks passed, Maria found herself more immersed in the job than she had anticipated. Every meeting, every phone call, every planning session became a reminder that this wasn't just a job. It was a calling. She wasn't just the head of housekeeping operations now. She was a leader, a change maker, someone who had the potential to alter the course of the hotel's future. But despite the strides she was making at work, a quiet ache lingered in Maria's heart. She was still haunted by the day she had been fired, by the memory of how Mr. Alvarez had turned his back on her when she needed support the most. Even though he had apologized, even though he had given her the position she now held, the trust between them had been fractured. Maria knew that things would never be the same. And yet, she couldn't ignore the small flicker of hope that had started to grow within her. Maybe, just maybe, she could forgive him. After all, he had done what he could to make amends. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And for Maria, that was all she could ask for. One afternoon, as she was going over some documents in her office, a knock came at the door. Maria looked up to see Mr. Alvarez standing there. His usual stern expression softened. He had a hesitant look on his face, as if he wasn't sure how to approach her. But Maria's heart wasn't as hard as it once was. She could see that he was trying, and that in itself meant something. "Maria," he began, his voice tentative, "I just wanted to say again how sorry I am for what happened. I know I'll never be able to undo the damage I caused, but I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you're doing here. You've been a huge asset to this hotel." Maria nodded, the weight of his words settling into her chest. There was sincerity in his voice, a genuine acknowledgement of what she had done and what she continued to do. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. "Thank you," Maria said softly, offering a small smile. "I'm doing this because I believe in what we can achieve together. And I'm not doing this just for the hotel. I'm doing this for the people who work here, for the guests we serve, and for myself. I've learned that you can't go through life just waiting for someone else to fix things. Sometimes, you have to be the one to take the first step." Mr. Alvarez smiled at her words, a sense of relief washing over his face. "You're right, and I'm glad you're here to help lead the way." After he left her office, Maria sat, back in her chair, taking a deep breath. It wasn't just the hotel that was changing, she was changing too. The woman who had walked into this hotel months ago was not the same woman who now sat behind this desk. She had found strength in the midst of hardship, courage in the face of betrayal, and a sense of purpose in her work. She had learned that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the past, it was about reclaiming the power to move forward. As the days went by, Maria began to find peace. The hotel had changed, yes, but so had she. And though the scars of the past would always remain, they no longer controlled her. She had faced her fears, and in doing so, had become stronger than she had ever thought possible. And as she stood at the window, looking out at the city skyline, Maria knew that no matter where life took her next, she would carry the lessons of the past with her. She had saved a life, fought for her dignity, and found the courage to rise above the challenges that had once seemed insurmountable. She had moved on, and in the process, she had become the woman she had always meant to be.